Hi, I'm Lisa Yao with NACD. Really delighted to be here today with the Northern California chapter and also with Derek Zaba. He is the co-head of shareholder activism practice at Sidley, Austin. With so much going on with the SEC, Derek, help us get a little sense of the current picture and also where things are headed.
Well, there've been a lot going on, despite the fact that they really don't have a chair. They have an acting chair that's been sitting in for the last month or two, and the nominated chair, Paul Atkins, has not yet been confirmed by the Senate. Nevertheless, the SEC has been quite active, and the issue that we're going to focus on today is their CDI. Their interpretation regarding what type of behavior investors can engage in without being required to file one more onerous 13D, Schedule 13D. And as many of you know, the Schedule 13D is reserved for, activists and hostile M&A, people who are really trying to influence or control the issuer. And the SEC has, with this guidance, taken a very broad view. So it used to be the case that investors could engage with companies and talk about topics that are part of a broad, good governance, things that are not specific to a company, but things that the investor would like to see across the landscape, like a declassified board, certain ESG issues. And if they limited themselves to those topics, then that would not require them to file a 13D if they were over 5%. Now the SEC has taken the reverse opinion, which is if you take any topic, including a classified board, including DEI, including the typical types of topics that are mentioned in the 13D, and you explicitly or implicitly make your vote contingent on that discussion or that issue, then you could be required to file a 13D. And this is something that none of the big investors really have the capability or the infrastructure to file a 13D. And so it's going to really chill the types of topics and the nature of the conversations that companies are having, particularly with the proxy voting teams at these large institutional investors.
So that brings us to a really good point. How are these large institutional investors reacting? Of course, we've seen really robust collaboration between groups like Vanguard, groups like BlackRock. Is that going to change? What are you seeing now?
Yeah, it certainly will change, and it has changed. I mean, this really caused a bunch of waves in the industry when it first came out. I don't think it was expected, and all the big institutional investors had to figure out what to do because none of them wanted to be deemed as needing to file a 13D. I think they're all in all again. This is early days. This will evolve, right? It's only been 6 weeks, and people are still figuring out what what their policies will be. But I think you can rest assured that they're going to be much less forthcoming about the issues that matter to them. So they're going to be much more reluctant to have proactive outreach about a specific issue. A lot of them will just it'll be more like a listen-only call. Maybe they'll ask some clarifying questions, but they're not going to specifically address or attack any specific issue. No agendas. I think there's a real chance that companies could be in these meetings and really talking about issues that may or may not be the ones that are specific concerns of the investor base because they're not going to tell you. So there's a lot of chance for for a bit of a disconnect in what the company is talking about, what the company is trying to convey, and what the investor really wants to hear.
Derek, that's really helpful, particularly from some of these huge shareholder groups that may dominate the cap table of tons of companies that board members sit on. So if you're a board director, how can you read between the lines here?
And it's going to be difficult because you are literally being asked to read someone's mind because they're not going to communicate what's on their mind with you at the risk of having to file a 13D. So you're going to have a good sense of where their mind is at coming in. Now, for those folks that have had engagement programs ongoing or have experience with these teams at other companies, you may have a sense about some of the issues. Right? You've been for them before. They may have told you in the last couple of engagements over the last 12, 18 months, the specific things that are on their mind. But as time goes on, it's going to be much more difficult to do so, especially as the people that are on these engagement teams from the investors may change. And it's not somebody you've ever dealt with before. I think companies are going to have to rely a lot more from people who are in the industry, people that do this for a living and speak to a lot of these investors and have seen multiple companies go through it. um, the advantage of somebody like myself or others in the industry is not only have we seen a number of companies that have gone through this, but we also have the ability to have conversations, more general conversations with these teams about the types of issues that they really care about in a way that they can't have with any single company.
Are you hearing from more institutional investors? Have they been contacting you or your colleagues to have these kind of discussions?
Yes, they have been reaching out as they develop their policies to make sure that they are, broadly understood and companies are aware of what's going on. And I think one of the advisors was worried about, how it might be awkward, right? These are conversations that companies have had with this person maybe for a couple of years, and now it's going to be a really awkward listen only type of conversation. And so they wanted to make sure that the companies were aware of this, of this change and to communicate, to myself and others in the industry that they will not be directing or talking about any specific topic. They're not going to lead the conversation. They're not going to lead into or give you a sense of what they're thinking. That also might result in some surprise votes, right? Might have some companies that you think you're in a good spot with these investors, but you didn't address one of the issues that you didn't know was on their mind, and you get a vote against. There will definitely be additional situations than there were in the past where you get votes against simply because the company wasn't aware or didn't adequately address an issue that in the past the investor would have specifically raised more questions about.
And that's a really good point around proxy season. Any other surprises that you think companies and particularly boards of directors should be looking out for?
Well, I think there's a lot. Even within the, to narrow that down to within the SEC, there's still a lot. I think that these are, it's not exactly sure where they're going to come from, right? This was a surprise that I don't think was on many people's mind, very, very few, if any, and they were probably close to the government. And this was an issue that came out before the new chair was even confirmed. So I do think that there is a potential for, many more things to come out of the SEC that can be even more significant and are not things that we can necessarily anticipate. So I expect this won't be the last conversation that you or I have on the topic of the SEC.
So you spend so much of your time dealing with proxy contests, dealing with shareholder activism. Tell us, what are you looking for to happen next?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. And this is if you look at the engagement and the votes that all of these institutional investors vote in any given scenario or any given season, very few of them are actually shareholder activism or contested M&A. I mean, it's a big part of my life, but from their perspective, it is only a small percentage of the votes. It's a different set of rules that and a different level of import in those types of discussions. And frankly, I don't think that the institutional investors have really had the time to think about the type of engagements and what they're going to do in these situations. And one complexity amongst many is in these situations, not only do they engage with the company, but they also engage with the activists. And so the question is, well, should we give the same amount of clarity to both sides? Should we do the max we can, which is to have more detailed conversations with the activists or hostile bidder than we do with the companies? And this is not on the top of their priority list. The other 95% of the votes were. So I think you'll see as we come in the coming months, we'll see how that evolves in this proxy season. And, for those of you that hopefully are not in a proxy contest this year, we'll have more guidance and understanding of how it will work going forward as we get into the summer and beyond.
Thank you so much. It was great to speak with you. For all of those out there, Derek Zaba of Sidley, Austin, and we're so grateful for his insight on the latest elements of shareholder activism and what is going on at the SEC. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here.